Great, thank you. So as Taylor mentioned in the intro, I am GMP quality expert at Redica Systems, but my expertise is in pharma, not in devices. And it occurs to me as I listen to this, that there are some commonalities, but there are some pretty big differences too. The whole idea of intended purpose is not something that we think about in the pharma world, right? It's just different. But one thing that is the same is that when regulations are made in a regulated industry by some regulator, that the other regulators around the world sit up and take notice, right? And they look at what's been written and they say, oh, I like that. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's do this. So I guess, my question is, as a result of the MDR, do you anticipate, other regulators to up their game, if you will, or to follow their lead, to revise their regulations as well? What do you think, Alison?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think overall, clearly the trend is toward more data, right, across the board, globally, in submissions, in regulations. Previous jurisdictions where there were minimal regulations, we're seeing more, or acceptance of, kind of the CE mark or 510K or FDA clearance. So the trend is certainly towards more data and more rigorous applications. I think it's interesting because, of course, with the MDR, there was this paradigm shift. We used to kind of always, a lot of companies would choose to go to Europe first and then do US second, right, with following on with a submission there. And of course, we've kind of seen that flip where the US has, a lot of folks are choosing, especially startups and smaller companies are choosing to go to the US first and then follow on with an MDR submission. And I think part of that too is just the newness, right, of MDR. Everyone's kind of getting a handle on that globally. So I think the trend is certainly towards more regulation, more data, more rigorous documentation, and also harmonization. So of course, from the FDA side, we're seeing kind of that nod to 13485, where they have said for a number of years now that there was going to be some integration there. Of course, I think originally they had said 2018 and then 2020, and then there was COVID. And so yeah, that's gone through some delays and there are some specific challenges there. Obviously, a lot of the 820 and 1345 overlap, so that's good. But I think for all of the regulatory professionals, we would all say we like harmonization in that makes it easier to kind of go globally, right? To have a more global approach. And I think that's what we'll see, right? As we kind of see some of these programs like MDSAP and, the harmonization to 13485 from a quality system perspective, from kind of that technical documentation perspective, STED files, some feedback from the IMDRF on that. I think that's probably the trend, and overall, yeah, there's definitely more data needed.
Yeah, and just and also on top of that, I think what I've realized is, as you go into different markets, you're talking about like Australia. Australia already has an MRA with the EU, for basically to adopt a lot of the elements of MDR. So you already have, that synergy that's already going to be developing between Australia and the EU. You have China that's adopting a lot of elements of ISO 1345. And so you have Saudi Arabia that has their own regulations now, and they've actually gone even above and beyond, particularly for UDI, than even what the EU has done. So you do have the EU MDR is sort of kicking off a lot of changes around the rules and regulations worldwide. So Brazil, is another one that's going through a lot of changes with their ordinances and so forth. So what you're seeing is the world there is differences, but there's also as Alison mentioned, there's a level of harmonization that is developing. I think ISO 134 is sort of going to be somewhat of the backbone to that. But I think that you are going to have still the labeling differences and stuff like that, again, nuances between each of the different countries. But a lot of the higher level, quality management system is going to be, I think, based upon, it's moving toward ISO 1345, because you said a lot of the major countries in different regions around the world they say in between your China's, your Australia's, your Korea's, basically to the Saudi Arabia, stuff like that. They're going to be sort of leaders for those different regions, and sort of so yes, I think over the years you're going to see a lot more harmonization as time goes on. So.